A global financial shift is underway. One that could reshape the foundations of the world economy. For nearly 80 years, the US dollar has been the world's most powerful currency, dominating global trade, energy markets, and international finance. But today, that dominance is being challenged, not by a single country, but by a coalition of rising powers led by China and supported by nations like Russia, India, and now Saudi Arabia. What began as quiet financial adjustments is rapidly turning into one of the biggest currency realignments in modern history.
Due to the self-reinforcing dynamic of network effects, the top currency tends to remain on top. But the last 400 years also show us that, no matter how entrenched they may appear, dominant international currencies can and do change.
At the center of this movement is Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter and a cornerstone of the petrodollar system. For decades, the kingdom's oil was priced and sold exclusively in US dollars, a deal that cemented America's financial supremacy. But recent decisions by Riyadh signal a historic change. Saudi Arabia is now openly considering selling oil in other currencies, particularly the Chinese yuan, marking a potential end to the petrodollar era and a direct challenge to the dollar's global dominance. To understand how big this is, we need to go back to 1974. That year, the United States and Saudi Arabia reached an agreement that would transform global finance. Saudi Arabia agreed to sell its oil exclusively in US dollars and to invest its surplus profits in American bonds. In return, the US provided military protection and guaranteed the kingdom's security. This agreement created the petrodollar system, a mechanism that forced every oil importing nation to hold US dollars, ensuring constant global demand for America's currency. It was a masterstroke of financial diplomacy that gave the US both economic and political leverage for nearly half a century. But that system only works as long as oil producers are willing to play by America's rules. Over the last decade, cracks have started to appear. Global oil trade is diversifying. Energy importing giants like China and India now demand flexibility in how they pay for oil. And as geopolitical tensions rise, countries outside the Western Bloc are questioning why the dollar should remain the default medium of exchange in global trade. Saudi Arabia's new partnerships suggest that the petrodollar's foundation is finally weakening. China has quietly become Saudi Arabia's most important oil customer. Today, it buys more Saudi crude than any other country, and Beijing doesn't want to pay in dollars. Instead, it has pushed for settlement in Yuan, the Chinese currency that the government is trying to internationalize through major trade agreements. In 2023, reports confirmed that Saudi Aramco had begun testing limited oil sales in Yuan, marking the first tangible step toward a parallel energy trading system independent of the dollar. This shift is more than symbolic. It signals growing trust between Riyadh and Beijing and the rise of China's influence in the Gulf. China has invested heavily in Saudi infrastructure through its Belt and Road Initiative and has positioned itself as a neutral partner in the Middle East. The message is clear. China is building a trade ecosystem where the yuan plays a central role, and Saudi Arabia, once the anchor of the dollar system, is now helping China make that happen. The yuan's global role has expanded dramatically in the last few years. In 2024, it became the fourth most used currency in global payments, overtaking the Japanese yen in some metrics. China's central bank has established swap lines with over 40 countries, allowing trade partners to settle transactions directly in yuan instead of converting through the dollar. Russia, Iran, Brazil, and even India are already using the yuan for bilateral trade. Each of these transactions chips away at the dollar's dominance. When a country no longer needs to convert its currency to dollars to buy oil or commodities, the global demand for US dollars decreases. And that reduction in demand undermines the dollar's most powerful advantage, its status as the world's reserve currency. If more nations adopt China's model, global finance could slowly shift toward a multi-currency world, where the yuan, the euro, and regional blocs share influence instead of one dominant dollar. Russia's role in this story is crucial. After Western sanctions cut Moscow off from the dollar-based financial system in 2022, Russia rapidly pivoted toward the yuan. Today, over 90% of trade between Russia and China is settled in local currencies, primarily yuan and rubles. Moscow now holds more of its reserves in yuan than in euros, marking a complete reversal of its pre-sanctions financial strategy. This move not only protected Russia's economy from US sanctions, but also helped accelerate the yuan's global rise. Beyond Russia, countries like Iran, Brazil, and even India have started using alternative settlement systems. The BRICS bloc, which recently expanded to include Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the UAE, has been openly discussing the creation of a new settlement currency that could eventually rival the dollar. While these plans are still early, the symbolism matters. The idea of challenging US monetary dominance is no longer unthinkable. It's becoming a shared goal among some of the world's largest emerging economies. While many countries talk about de-dollarization, Saudi Arabia's involvement changes everything. As the world's largest oil exporter and a key OPEC member, Saudi decisions directly shape global energy markets. If the kingdom fully transitions to pricing oil in multiple currencies, or even partially in yuan, it could trigger a domino effect across other oil-producing nations. Countries like the UAE, Kuwait, and even Nigeria could follow, diversifying their payment systems and reducing their dependency on the dollar. This shift would have enormous implications for the United States. The dollar's global dominance allows America to finance large deficits cheaply and to impose financial sanctions that most countries cannot resist. Losing that advantage would reduce US economic leverage and accelerate the emergence of a multipolar world economy. For now, Saudi Arabia is balancing both sides, maintaining ties with Washington while deepening trade with Beijing. But the direction is clear. The world is slowly moving toward a post-dollar era. A world where the dollar is no longer dominant would be fundamentally different. Global trade would become more fragmented as countries settle in regional currencies or bilateral arrangements. Exchange rate volatility could increase, and smaller economies might find it harder to access liquidity. But for countries like China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, this shift represents freedom. Freedom from US sanctions, from Federal Reserve policy, and from dependence on American financial institutions. The transformation won't happen overnight. The dollar remains deeply embedded in the global financial system, and the yuan still faces major hurdles, including limited convertibility and tight government control. But the trajectory is unmistakable. Every oil sale in yuan, every BRICS financial agreement, and every country that diversifies away from the dollar bring the world one step closer to a multipolar monetary system. The dollar's fall won't be sudden, but it will be irreversible once the world learns how to trade without it. This is Global Economic News. We break down the biggest financial shifts shaping the world economy. Subscribe to stay ahead of the next story, because the global balance of power is changing faster than ever before.